If someone had told me being seen could feel lighter than hiding, I'd have argued. Walking into Bluefinch Cafe, the first thing Sloane registered was how loudly her heart was beating. It wasn't nerves, not exactly. Sloane Mercer didn't do nerves. Not in billion-dollar acquisition talks. Not before shareholders when she defended her bold, sometimes reckless vision for the company. And certainly not for a blind date arranged by her meddling younger sister, who liked to claim Sloane's biggest flaw was her inability to simply relax and fall in love like a normal person. No. Sloane's heart pounded for a different reason. Because for the first time in years, she was showing up as someone she wasn't. She wore jeans that didn't cost $1,000. A worn leather jacket borrowed from her driver. And a faded navy t-shirt with no visible branding. Her hair was pulled into a simple ponytail, and the vintage watch on her wrist was a $15 flea market find swapped specifically to avoid flashing her usual Cartier. Today, she wasn't CEO Sloane Mercer. She was just Sloane. And for some inexplicable reason, that terrified her. She spotted the woman at a corner table. She was reading completely unaware of her surroundings. One hand wrapped around a ceramic mug, the other turning the pages slowly like she was savoring every word. Her dark curls framed a face that was all angles and contradictions. Soft lips, strong brows, eyes that looked like they'd seen too much and still chose to be kind. Sloane's breath caught because this woman wasn't what she'd expected. She wasn't polished or made up for the date. She wasn't posing or scrolling on her phone. She was just there, present, real. And when she looked up, the faintest smile curving her lips, Sloane felt something in her chest shift. Hi. Hey, if you're enjoying this story, go ahead and drop a like to help us grow even more and let me know in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what score would you give this story so far? Your feedback makes all the difference, Sloane said, suddenly unsure of what to do with her hands. You must be Lila. Lila stood to greet her, offering a firm, warm handshake. And you're Sloane? You're actually on time. That's rare for these things. Her voice was low and rich, like late-night radio, with the trace of a laugh beneath every word. Sloane sat down trying to remember what normal people said on first dates. She couldn't remember the last time she'd been on one without a background check and prenup floating in the background. Yeah, well, punctuality is one of my more dazzling traits. Lila raised an eyebrow, amused. Good to know. I'll add that to your file. Sloane blinked. You're keeping a file on me? Mental file, Lila said smoothly. So far, you're mysterious, sarcastic, and clearly uncomfortable with compliments. I'm intrigued. Sloane laughed before she could stop herself. It felt good, different. They talked for hours. Sloane didn't touch her phone once, didn't glance at the time. Lila told her about the nonprofit she worked for, helping kids aging out of foster care find housing and jobs. She spoke with quiet passion, hands moving expressively when she got excited, her eyes lighting up every time she mentioned one of her kids as she called them. Sloane listened enthralled. She told Lila half-truths, said she worked in operations and that she consulted for mid-sized companies, which technically wasn't a lie, just selective. It wasn't about deceit, she told herself. It was about not letting the wrong things matter too soon. She dated women who cared more about her bank account than her heartbeat. She was tired of those eyes, the ones that saw her last name before they saw her. Lila never asked about money or her car or where she lived. She only asked questions that made Sloane think, laugh, open up in ways she hadn't in years. The moment the waitress brought their check, Sloane instinctively reached for it, then hesitated. Right. She was pretending to be broke. Want to split it? Lila offered, already reaching for her purse. Sloane paused. Actually, do you mind if I get it? You paid for the coffees, and I'd feel weird if I didn't at least get lunch. Lila studied her for a second, then nodded. All right, but next time I'm buying. Next time. Sloane's stomach fluttered. After they walked outside, they stood there for a beat, neither of them moving. Riverton was loud around them, horns and voices and wind slicing through September sun. But Sloane heard none of it. Only Lila. I had a really good time, Sloane said quietly. Me, too, Lila replied softer than before. Then a pause. You're different from what I expected. Sloane swallowed. In a good way, I hope. Lila leaned in, her voice a near whisper, the best way. And then, with a touch so light it barely counted as contact, she brushed her fingers against Sloane's arm before turning and walking away. Sloane stood frozen on the sidewalk, feeling the ghost of that touch, heart pounding like she'd just survived a boardroom battle. She didn't know what the hell had just happened, but for the first time in a long, long time, she wanted more. Sloane replayed every second of the date in her mind for the next 48 hours like it was a scene from a movie she wasn't ready to stop watching. Lila's smile, her dry wit, the way she listened, not just waited to speak, but listened like Sloane's words mattered even when they were carefully curated lies. She didn't know why it had hit her so hard. Maybe because the date hadn't felt like a performance. Maybe because she hadn't felt like a product. She'd gone in pretending to be someone else, but with Lila, she'd somehow ended up closer to her real self than she had in years. And that scared her more than she wanted to admit. So when Lila texted her the next morning, "I found a cafe with absurdly good almond croissants. Want to help me judge them ruthlessly?" Sloane stared at the screen for a full 10 minutes before answering. "Only if we also judge their coffee like pretentious snobs." That earned her a smiley face with sunglasses and a time to meet the next day. It was fast, too fast. Sloane didn't do second dates after one day. But she didn't say no. She didn't want to. This time she wore another borrowed jacket, scuffed boots, and left her driver 2 blocks away so he wouldn't be seen. Blue Finch Cafe was smaller, cozier, and Lila was already there. Again, reading again, completely absorbed again. Absolutely stunning in the least deliberate way. This time when she looked up, her smile was immediate and bright. "Hey, you came. I said I would. You'd be surprised how many people flake after a good first date." Sloane slid into the seat across from her. "Why would anyone flake on you?" Lila tilted her head. "That's dangerously close to a compliment. Should I add that to your file?" "Definitely. And while you're at it, add selectively charming under pressure." They ordered croissants and coffee, and the conversation flowed like they were old friends meeting for the 100th time. Lila was warmer today, more open. She talked about the frustrations of underfunding, the joy of seeing a teen get accepted into college, the heartbreak of losing one to the streets. Sloane didn't interrupt. She just watched and listened and felt something in her chest pull tighter every time Lila spoke with her whole heart. It wasn't just attraction. It wasn't just admiration. It was something more dangerous. Something like longing. When Lila asked about her life, Sloane stuck to the same vague lines. "Consulting's not always exciting, but I like the challenge. I work with a lot of logistics teams. Problem solving is my thing." "I can see that," Lila said, sipping her coffee. "You seem like the kind of person who thrives under pressure. But there's something about you," she leaned in slightly. "You don't talk like someone who answers to anyone." Sloane swallowed. "Maybe I don't. Independent, confident, a little mysterious." "What's the catch?" Sloane forced a smile. "Isn't mystery part of the fun?" Lila narrowed her eyes, but let it go. For now. After the date, they walked together through Fountain Row Park nearby. Leaves crunched under their feet, the early signs of autumn in full swing. Their hands brushed once, and neither of them pulled away. Lila told a story about trying to cook for one of her teen clients and setting off a smoke alarm. Sloane laughed so hard her stomach hurt. "I don't cook either," Sloane admitted. "Too many moving parts. I like control." Lila said with mock seriousness. "A control freak. That explains a lot." "Don't judge me." "Never," Lila said, and she meant it. They stopped near a fountain. The sunlight hit Lila's face in just the right way, and Sloane felt something raw and electric through her. She wanted to kiss her so badly. But she didn't. She couldn't. Not with the lies still sitting between them like a ticking bomb. "I should go," Sloane said, her voice tight. "Everything okay?" Lila looked genuinely concerned. Sloane nodded too fast. "Yeah, just early meeting tomorrow." "You sure?" "Yeah." She forced another smile, hating it. Lila touched her wrist gently. "Okay, but next time you don't get to escape so easily." Sloane nodded and turned before she could say something real. She walked quickly, each step away from Lila heavier than the last. When she got home to her penthouse, a space that suddenly felt colder than usual. She stood at the window for a long time, staring out at the skyline. The lie wasn't sustainable. She knew that Lila deserved more. But Sloane also knew how people changed when they found out who she really was. The softness disappeared. The masks came out. The questions started and the expectations. She'd been touched by genuine affection tonight. And it felt like a drug she didn't know how to handle. Her phone buzzed. A message from Lila. Next time I want the full story. You're too interesting to be this vague. Sloane stared at the screen, chest tight, lips parted. She typed a reply, then deleted it, then typed again. Finally, she sent, "Soon, I promise." But even as she sent it, she wasn't sure if she could keep that promise because the deeper she fell, the more dangerous the truth became. And Lila, she was already starting to mean too much. Sloane stood outside the entrance of Lila's apartment building, holding 2 cups of coffee and feeling absolutely ridiculous. She didn't do surprises. She didn't do early morning drop-ins. She didn't stand on sidewalks like some rom-com idiot hoping to impress the girl with overpriced pastries and an undercooked lie. And yet here she was. It had been 3 days since their second date. 3 days of pretending she wasn't checking her phone every 5 minutes. 3 days of waking up with Lila's laugh echoing in her mind like a song she couldn't get out of her head. She'd caved when Lila texted a meme at midnight, something dumb that made her laugh out loud in bed. Sloane replied, and somehow that became a full conversation, then a phone call, then Lila murmuring sleepily, "I wish she were here," before yawning and dozing off on the line. Sloane didn't sleep after that. She lay staring at the ceiling, wanting things she hadn't let herself want in years. So now she was here, standing on the concrete like a woman who had no idea what she was doing. The door opened and Lila stepped out in leggings, a hoodie, and an expression that melted instantly into delight. "You brought coffee and croissants," Sloane said, lifting the bag. "I figured we could sit in Fountain Row Park, talk, and judge strangers together." Lila grinned. "This is dangerously close to a third date. Is that a bad thing?" She took the coffee and sipped, her eyes never leaving Sloane's. "No," Sloane said. "It's a very, very good thing." They walked to the same park and sat on the bench by the fountain where they'd almost kissed. The leaves were more golden now, the air cooler. Sloane noticed everything, the way Lila tucked her knees up when she sat, the way her nose scrunched when she bit into the croissant and discovered the filling. "Okay, this might actually be the best one yet," Lila admitted. "See, I do know things," Sloane said, bumping her shoulder playfully. "Still mysterious though, still vague. You realize that, right?" Sloane exhaled. "I know. It's complicated. Life usually is, but I'm not asking for your bank statements. Just honesty." Eventually, Sloane looked down at her hands. She hated this being seen and still hiding. Lila placed a hand over Sloane's. "I'm not pushing. I just like you a lot. And I don't want to fall for a version of you that isn't real." The words hit Sloane harder than she expected. Fall for? It wasn't casual anymore. It wasn't light. There was gravity now. "You're not," Sloane said quietly. "You're seeing more of me than most people ever do." "Then keep letting me," Lila whispered, their eyes locked, and Sloane moved before she could stop herself. She leaned in, slow and deliberate, giving Lila every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met softly at first, tentative and careful, like a question neither of them had dared to ask. But then it deepened. Lila's hand slid into Sloane's hair, and Sloane cooped her jaw, pulling her closer, everything else disappearing. Fountain Row Park, the cold, the lie, all gone. Just this. Just them. When they finally pulled back, Lila was breathless. "Well, that's one way to silence a girl." Sloane smiled against her lips. "Worked, didn't it?" Lila laughed, but it was softer now, more vulnerable. "I don't know what this is yet, but it feels like it could be something real." Sloane rested her forehead against Lila's. "It scares the hell out of me how real it feels." Lila took her hand again, weaving their fingers together, then let's be scared together. They spent the rest of the morning walking, talking, brushing hands. Sloane felt herself sinking deeper with every look, every laugh. She wanted to stop time, wanted to freeze this moment before everything shattered because it would. She was sure of it. That night, back in her penthouse, she opened her laptop to a flurry of emails, mergers, press leaks, questions from the board, her real life clawing at her like it always did. She ignored it. She opened a blank document instead and started typing. Not business, not legal strategy, but the truth. The whole truth. She didn't know if she'd ever send it to Lila, but part of her needed to see it written, needed to admit that she was falling in love with someone who only knew half of her. Days passed. They kept texting, talking, meeting up, always in public, always casual, always Sloane in borrowed clothes, in borrowed time, trying to pretend this could last. One night, Lila invited her over. Pizza and terrible movies. She promised. Sloane brought wine. They sat on the floor, Sloane in sweatpants for the first time in her adult life, and Lila curled against her side like it was the most natural thing in the world. They kissed between scenes, laughed until their sides hurt. And then, when the credits rolled, Lila turned off the TV and looked at Sloane. Seriously, stay. Sloane's heart stopped. Lila, just stay. No pressure. I don't want a night to end. Sloane should have said no. She should have pulled back. But instead, she nodded. And when Lila led her to the bedroom and they lay tangled in soft sheets and quiet breaths, Sloane felt something she hadn't in years. Peace. The kind that comes with being exactly where you're meant to be. She fell asleep with Lila's hand resting over her heart. In the dark, Sloane whispered too quietly to be heard. I'm not who you think I am. But Lila didn't stir. She just held her tighter. The sound of birds outside the window was the first thing Sloane registered when she woke up. The second was the warmth of Lila's body curled tightly against her. And the third was the way her heart acted, not from discomfort, but from how violently she wanted this to be real. Not borrowed. Not borrowed clothes, borrowed time, borrowed identity. Real. Lila shifted in her sleep, her arm tightening around Sloane's waist like her body knew something her mind hadn't yet caught up to. Sloane could have stayed like that forever. But reality didn't care about what she wanted. Reality was the stack of emails waiting in her inbox, the press embargo about to drop on the new merger, and the silent lies stretching longer between them. Every day she didn't confess. She slipped from the bed with care, mindful not to wake Lila, and drifted through the small apartment, taking in the framed photos on the shelves, Lila with her sister, Lila with the kids from her nonprofit, Lila at a protest holding a cardboard sign that read, "People over profit." Sloane smiled. Of course she would. Lila fought for the world with her whole chest. What Sloane didn't know was how Lila would react if she learned the truth, that the woman she'd welcomed into her home, her life, her bed was the face of one of the country's most aggressively capitalist empires. She poured a glass of water and stood at the window. Riverton was still hazy, barely waking, and so was she, in that gentle daze that only came from sleeping beside someone who made breathing feel possible again. You trying to sneak out on me? Lila's voice was sleep-rough, soft, amused. Sloane turned, heart hitching. Lila leaned in the doorway wearing nothing but one of Sloane's t-shirts and a smirk that made Sloane's knees go weak. No, Sloane said. Just thinking. Dangerous. Lila patted over, wrapped her arms around Sloane from behind, and set her chin on Sloane's shoulder. Come back to bed. It's Sunday. The world can wait. Sloane wished it could. She let herself melt into Lila's warmth, stealing the moment, even as the ache in her chest sharpened. Can I take you somewhere tonight? She asked suddenly. Like a date? Yes, but not coffee. Something nicer. Dress up. Let me? I don't know. Do it right. Lila looked surprised. That's a little fancy for the mysterious consultant who lives in hoodies. Maybe I'm full of surprises. Lila studied her. Okay, I'm intrigued. Where are we going? It's a surprise. Trust me. Lila hesitated, then nodded. All right, I'll wear heels. Don't make me regret it. That evening, Sloane waited outside Lila's building in a borrowed car. Not her usual driver, not the Maybach, just a sleek, rented Audi she could return without questions. She wore a tailored black suit that hugged her body in all the right ways, but had no visible designer labels, just enough to hint at elegance without tipping into suspicion. When Lila stepped outside, Sloane's breath caught. She wore a deep green dress, her hair pinned back, her lips painted red. She looked like Sloane's undoing. Wow, Sloane said. You clean up, okay? Lila rolled her eyes, laughing as she climbed into the car. You look dangerous. Maybe I am. God, I hope so. They drove to a rooftop restaurant with a view of the skyline. Not one of the spots Sloane usually reserved for board meetings or client dinners. This one was private, intimate, hidden. She'd used her assistant's name on the reservation to avoid recognition. As they stepped out, Lila looked around impressed. You really went all out. Sloane took her hand. You deserve all out. They were led to a corner table with candles and soft jaws humming in the background. Lila stared at her across the table, eyes warm and curious. Okay, what's going on with you? What do you mean? You've been different today. Quiet, thoughtful. You're always a little guarded, but tonight it feels like something's spinning in your head. Sloane hesitated. Her thumb traced the rim of her glass. There's something I want to tell you, but I'm scared it'll ruin everything. Lila's smile faded slightly. That's serious? Sloane nodded. I didn't expect to meet you. I didn't expect to feel like this. And now it's complicated. Lila reached across the table and took her hand. Sloane, whatever it is, I'd rather know than be lied to. I've had enough of people hiding things. Please just tell me. Sloane opened her mouth. The truth was right there, pressing at her lips. But then her phone buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Lila raised an eyebrow. You can answer it if you need to. Sloane checked the screen. 5 messages, 1 from her head of PR, 2 from board members, 1 from her sister, and 1 from her assistant. Her stomach dropped as she read them. Sloane, need to prepare a statement ASAP. The Moore tech leak just went public. The story's everywhere. Your name, your dating profile, your personal info. It's all out. Lila is too. Damage control in motion. But it's bad. Sloane's throat went dry. Lila watched her confused. What's wrong? Sloane looked up, eyes wide with panic. We have to go. What now? I'll explain in the car. Please, Lila. Just trust me. Sloane threw cash on the table and pulled Lila up, guiding her out as people in the restaurant started murmuring, glancing at their phones, looking at her like they knew her. Lila was asking questions, but Sloane couldn't hear. Her heart thundered as she opened the car door and practically shoved Lila inside. She got in beside her, locked the doors, and started driving. Sloane, what the hell is going on? Lila demanded, voice rising. Sloane stared at the road. I lied to you about everything, and now it's all coming out. Lila's silence was louder than any scream. Sloane kept driving, gripping the wheels so hard her knuckles turned white, knowing the one thing she never wanted to happen was already in motion, and Lila might never forgive her. The silence in the car was suffocating. Sloane could hear her own breath. Too fast, too shallow, and the occasional ping of her phone as more messages poured in. Each one tightening the noose she tied around herself. Lila sat rigid in the passenger seat, arms crossed, eyes forward, lips pressed into a line so tight it looked carved from stone. She hadn't said a single word since Sloane confessed. Not a question, not a scream, not even a curse, just silence. And Sloane, who was used to controlling rooms full of ruthless men in tailored suits, had never felt so helpless in her life. I'm taking us somewhere private, Sloane said finally, her voice. No one will follow us there. We can talk. I owe you. You owe me the truth, Lila cutting coldly. Something you should have given me before this turned into a circus. Sloane winced. I know. Do you? Because it doesn't feel like you do. Sloane cut the wheel and took a sharp right into the underground garage beneath her private downtown building. She swiped her card, rolled into her reserved spot, discreet, gated, secure, and killed the engine. Come upstairs with me, she said quietly. I'll explain everything. Lila stared. Explain it here. Sloane shut her eyes, then forced herself to meet Lila's gaze. My name is Sloane Mercer. I'm not a consultant. I'm the CEO of Moore Tech, a multinational tech firm. I inherited it at 25 when my father died. I've been running it for 10 years. I didn't tell you because I've been used, judged, manipulated, wanted for everything except who I am. I didn't want that with you. Lila blinked, slow. So instead, you lied. You let me fall for a version of you that doesn't exist. No, a beat. Yes. Her voice cracked. You fell for me, and I knew it was built on a lie. Sloane opened her door and stepped out. Please just come upstairs. Let me show you. Not the money, not the power. Me. For a second, Sloane thought she'd refuse. But something in Lila's face shifted, not forgiveness, but a hard need for clarity. 15 minutes, she said, sharp. That's all you get. Sloane nodded, throat tight. The penthouse wasn't what Lila expected. She'd imagined sterile luxury, chrome, glass, chill. Instead, Sloane's home was warm, art on the walls, shelves of real books, a grand piano by the windows, soft lamps, a fire ticking in the corner. It felt lived in, human. Lila refused to be charmed. She stayed by the door, arms crossed. Start talking. Sloane took her place at the kitchen island, eyes tired. When my sister set up the dating profile, she made me swear not to lead with money. I took it further. I made a whole new profile. Different job, different wardrobe, different life. I wanted to meet someone who saw me first. Not the company, not the fortune, not the name. Lila's laugh was bitter. You wanted someone to fall in love with your soul, not your bank account. Cute. It wasn't supposed to go this far. So what? You were going to ghost me after a few fun dates. No. I don't know. Maybe at first, but then I met you and everything changed. Sloane's voice cracked on that last word, and she hated how it made her sound. Weak. Lila finally moved, pacing slowly through the living room, taking everything in. You told me you didn't cook because you liked control. That wasn't a joke, was it? No. Every time I asked about your past, you deflected. Every time I got too close, you changed the subject. Because I was terrified you'd look at me the way everyone else does. And now Lila turned to her, eyes burning. What do you see when you look at me? Some project? A good-hearted charity worker to balance your ruthless empire? Stop it. Sloane stepped forward. Raw emotion in every word. I see the first person who made me laugh without thinking. Who looked at me like I was enough. Not because of what I owned, but because of who I was when I let my guard down. I fell for you, Lila. And that scared the hell out of me. Lila shook her head. You don't get to say that. Not when everything you showed me was a curated performance. Sloane walked over slowly and placed a trembling hand over her own chest. This what I feel for you is the most honest thing I've ever known. Lila swallowed hard. She looked torn, devastated, furious, and something else. Something that looked like it hurt to hold back. You slept in my bed. You kissed me like I was your first breath after drowning. And the whole time you were lying to me. Yes, Sloane whispered. But it didn't make anything I felt less real. Lila stood there shaking her head and Sloane stepped close enough to feel the tension in her shoulders. Say something, please. Lila looked up at her and the tears in her eyes were like knives. I don't know who you are. I'll show you, Sloane begged. I'll give you everything. My past, my fears, my shame, my name. Just don't walk away from this yet. Lila's face crumpled. I need time. Sloane froze. Time to think, to feel, to breathe. Because right now, all I can hear is the echo of your lie. She turned and walked to the door. If this was real for you, really real, then you'll let me go and you'll wait. Sloane didn't move. She just watched Lila disappear down the hallway. Each footstep a gunshot to her chest. The door clicked shut behind her. And Sloane, for the first time in a long time, felt completely alone in her own empire. Sloane didn't leave the apartment for 4 days. Not because of the press. Her PR team handled the chaos with ruthless precision, spinning the narrative just enough to maintain investor confidence while deflecting personal questions. Not because of work. Her COO stepped in with authority, knowing better than to ask why Sloane suddenly went silent. No, Sloane stayed inside because nothing outside mattered. Not when Lila wasn't speaking to her. Not when every breath felt like it caught in her throat. The world could wait. For the first time in her life, Sloane Mercer let everything else burn so she could sit in her penthouse with only her guilt and the ghost of a woman who hadn't judged her until she had to. Lila hadn't responded to any of her messages. Not the long aching one Sloane sent the first night filled with all the truth she should have said sooner. Not the second one, just 2 words. I'm sorry. Not the third, which she deleted after typing it and stared at the blinking cursor for an hour. She didn't want to smother Lila. She didn't want to push, but the silence was torture. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart jumped only to plummet when it wasn't Lila. She tried to work, failed. She tried to sleep, failed. She tried to eat, barely succeeded. In her weakest moment, she sat at the grand piano, fingers trembling as she played a quiet melody that echoed through the empty apartment like a confession. A song with no lyrics, no answers, just longing. Lila didn't turn on the TV. She avoided social media. She didn't need headlines to remind her what Sloane looked like in a boardroom. She'd seen her already up close in the dark, in the light, in bed, in her kitchen, in her arms. That was the part she couldn't escape. She didn't miss the company. She missed her. The way Sloane's laugh had surprised her every time. The way she touched her like she was made of glass, but kissed her like she was the air she needed to breathe. She missed the version of Sloane she'd met, the stripped-down, sarcastic, slightly awkward woman who brought Quaisonons and judged people in Fountain Row Park with her. And she hated herself for missing someone who had built their connection on a lie. But was it a lie, or was it self-protection? Lila didn't know anymore. She hated the press for making her feel like a prop in someone else's story. She hated herself for wondering if Sloane had really meant everything she said. And most of all, she hated how much she still wanted to hear her voice. Her sister noticed at first. "You're quiet," she said one morning, passing Lila a cup of coffee. "That's not like you." "I'm just tired of the news or of the woman." Lila flinched. "Both." Her sister sat beside her. "You told me she made you feel seen, that she looked at you like you mattered." "She did." "And you think that was fake?" Lila shook her head. "No, that's the worst part. I know it wasn't." "Then what's stopping you from talking to her?" Lila looked down at her coffee, voice small. "I don't know if I can trust her again." "That's fair." A pause. "But maybe if what you had was real, then that conversation deserves more than silence." Lila didn't reply, but the words stayed with her all day. The next morning, Sloane sat at her piano again. She hadn't touched it since the night Lila left. But today, her fingers moved automatically, her body aching with a need to create something. Anything that wasn't pain. That's when the knock came. Soft, hesitant. She froze. She wasn't expecting anyone. The staff had the day off. Security never buzzed someone up without telling her, unless her heart stuttered. She stood slowly, legs weak beneath her, and walked to the door. When she opened it, Lila stood there, hair down, no makeup, just a hoodie and jeans and eyes that made Sloane's chest cave in. "Hi," Lila said. Sloane swallowed hard. "Hi, I wasn't sure if I should come." Sloane's voice was a whisper. "I wasn't sure if I could survive it if you didn't." Lila looked away, then back. "I'm not here to forgive everything. I'm not even sure I'm ready to talk about us, but I couldn't ignore what I felt." Sloane nodded slowly, her throat tight. "You don't have to say anything. Just come in. Be here." Lila stepped inside. The door closed behind her, sealing them in the quiet that used to be comforting, but now felt fragile. She looked around slowly, taking in the space again. "You play piano only when I'm falling apart." Lila let out a soft laugh. "Well, that's relatable." Sloane moved carefully toward her. "I don't expect anything, Lila. Not forgiveness, not a clean slate. I just wanted you to know that I meant every word. Every moment with you is real. I just didn't have the courage to be real first." Lila's eyes shimmered. "I know." Silence. Thick. Tangled. Sloane stepped even closer. Not touching, not daring. "Do you want to sit? Talk, yell?" "Maybe all of it," Lila said quietly. "But not yet." Sloane nodded. Lila studied her. "You look like hell." "I feel worse." "Good." And then finally, Lila stepped into her arms. Sloane exhaled like she hadn't breathed in days, wrapping her arms around her tightly, clutching her like she'd never let go again. She buried her face in Lila's shoulder, and Lila held her like someone who wasn't ready to let herself fall, but needed to feel the ground again. No words, no promises, just warmth, just proximity, just hope. The door hadn't closed completely behind them, and the world was still out there waiting. But in that moment, for the first time since everything shattered, Sloane didn't feel broken. She felt seen. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. Maybe it was the start of something that could survive the truth. They didn't talk much that night. Lila didn't stay. She left before the sun dipped completely below the skyline, just as Riverton lights began blinking awake outside Sloane's windows. But her presence lingered like a second heartbeat in the room, loud and undeniable. Sloane watched the door long after it closed. Her skin still warm where Lila had held her. Her body aching with everything she hadn't said. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't resolution. But it was something. A crack in the ice. And for Sloane, that was enough to hope again. She didn't push. She didn't text. She didn't call. Not for 3 days. Instead, she waited. She focused on work for the first time since the leak, burying herself in numbers, contracts, strategies, everything that used to distract her so easily. But now, even billion-dollar deals felt dull. Every room she entered was full of people who smiled because they had to, who flattered her because of who she was on paper. None of it mattered. None of them were Lila. On the 4th night, just as Sloane was locking her phone screen after reading an old message Lila had sent weeks ago, "You feel like a secret I actually want to keep." Her intercom buzzed. Her chest seized. She ran barefoot to the door. Lila stood there again. No warning, no hesitation. This time she was holding 2 takeout bags. "Ty," she said, her voice casual like they had been swimming in heartbreak a few days ago. "And yes, I remembered your insane spice tolerance." Sloane stared. "Is this a dream?" Lila stepped inside. "If it is, you're severely underdressed for it." Sloane looked down at the worn t-shirt and shorts she'd thrown on. "Right. I would have gone for lingerie if I knew I'd be hallucinating you." "Don't test me," Lila said, setting the food on the counter. "I brought extra curry." "God, I missed you." Sloane had meant to say it. "Not like that." Lila paused, her back to her. She slowly turned around. "Yeah," she said softly. "I missed you, too." They ate on the couch with their legs tucked under them, trading bites and sarcastic comments, slipping into the kind of comfort that usually takes years to build. Lila asked about the fallout from a leak. Sloane told her about the press frenzy, the board's panic, her decision to issue a single statement, no comment. "My personal life is not up for discussion." Lila raised an eyebrow. "That's bold." "I learned it from someone," Sloane said, her eyes fixed on her. "Someone who doesn't apologize for living honestly." Lila looked away, her expression unreadable. "You could have told me the truth earlier." "I know. Why didn't you?" Sloane set her container down, fingers tightening slightly. "Because I'm terrified of being loved for the wrong reasons, and because the last time I let someone in, they took what they wanted and used it to destroy me. I couldn't tell if what we had was real until it was too real to risk." And now Sloane met her eyes. "Now I'd burn everything I have just to keep 1 more hour with you." The words sat between them, heavy and true. Lila didn't speak for a moment, then she leaned back against the couch, exhaling. "I don't know how to do this." "Neither do I. You built a whole life where no one really knows you. And you built one where everyone expects you to carry their pain." Lila flinched slightly. Sloane softened her voice. "I don't want to add to that. I just want to be someone you can lean on, too." Lila looked at her and something in her eyes flickered. Vulnerability maybe, or the sharp edge of desire mixed with fear. "You can't fix this in one dinner." "I'm not trying to fix it. I'm trying to earn it." Lila studied her, then slowly reached over and took Sloane's hand. "Then you need to stop pretending you're not still scared." Sloane laced their fingers together. "I am, but I'm more scared of not trying." They stayed like that for a long while. At last, Lila inched closer and rested her head on Sloane's shoulder. "I'm not ready to forgive everything," she whispered. "I know," Sloane said, "but I don't want you to stay away." Lila's quiet exhale felt like relief. "Then stay." "Not tonight." Sloane nodded. "Tomorrow?" Lila kissed her cheek. "Maybe." The next day, Lila texted, "Come see where I work. No assistants, no makeup, just you." Sloane didn't hesitate. She arrived in jeans, sneakers, and a plain white tee, no driver, no car service, no performance. Lila met her at the community center front desk, denim jacket on, hair pulled back. "You clean up okay," Sloane teased. "Wait till you see me yell at teenagers." The day was a whirl. Sloane hauled donations, sorted clothing, chatted with volunteers, and folded pamphlets for at-risk youth. She watched Lila in her element, steady, warm, commanding, a natural leader. Each grateful glance sent toward Lila stretched something in Sloane's chest a little wider. By closing time she was sweaty, aching, and happier than she'd been in weeks. Outside, Lila walked her to the door. "You didn't complain once." "I'm still pretending I'm not sore." Lila smirked. "You were watching me the whole time. Was it that obvious?" Painfully. Sloane stepped closer. "I can't stop." "Then don't." And Lila kissed her, quick, soft, real. Not their first kiss, not their goodbye, something between. A beginning. Sloane stood there, stunned, while Lila walked away without looking back. And Sloane knew, down to the marrow, that something had shifted. Something was being rebuilt, slowly, brick by brick. This time she wouldn't hide. This time she'd show Lila everything, the truth, the mess, the fear, the love. All of it. The third time Lila kissed her, Sloane didn't hold back. Not with her breath, not with her hands, and especially not with the quiet, aching hunger she'd been trying to tame since the first time they met. She pulled Lila in with one hand at the back of her neck, the other at her waist, holding her like she was something precious, but also like she'd been waiting to fall apart in her arms for weeks. The kiss started soft, tentative, Lila testing, Sloane surrendering, but it deepened quickly until neither of them could remember why they were trying to take it slow in the first place. When they finally parted, breathless, Lila's eyes searched hers with something wild and cautious all at once. "Tell me this isn't just adrenaline," she whispered. Sloane shook her head, her thumb tracing the curve of Lila's cheek. "It's you. Always you." That night, they didn't go home together. Not because they didn't want to, but because they both needed to feel the weight of what they were choosing. This wasn't the chase anymore. This was the beginning of trust being rebuilt moment by moment, kiss by kiss, hour by hour. Sloane respected that, craved it, even as she drove home with her lips still tasting like Lila and her skin still humming from the way Lila had gripped the back of her jacket. The next 2 weeks unfolded like the slow turn of a page. Sloane didn't want to rush. Lila started letting her in again. Quietly, carefully, they didn't talk about the past every time they met. Sometimes they just ate dinner on the floor. Sometimes they played cards in Fountain Row Park. Sometimes they sat in silence, shoulder to shoulder, watching the world pass them by. And that silence wasn't empty. It was healing. There were hard moments, too. Moments when Lila would pull away slightly, needing space, when she'd go quiet if Sloane mentioned her family or wealth too casually. But every time Sloane noticed, and every time she slowed down, met Lila where she was, and reminded her with actions, not just words, that she wasn't hiding anymore. One night, after Sloane helped Lila set up for a fundraiser at the center, they walked home side by side. "I'm nervous about this," Lila said suddenly, her voice low. "About us." "I know," Sloane said. "So am I." "You're never nervous. You walk into buildings that carry your name like they belong to you." "I never walked into you." Lila looked at her. "That's a dangerous line. It's a dangerous feeling." Lila stopped walking. Sloane did too. "Then say it," Lila whispered. "Say what you feel when you look at me." Sloane stepped closer. So close their bodies brushed. And she didn't look away. "I feel like I want to be better. Like I want to stop hiding. Like I want to tear the world down just to rebuild it around you." Lila's breath caught. "That's a lot." "Sloane. I know. I've never done a little of anything in my life." Lila let out a breathy, almost disbelieving laugh. "God help me. I like you so much it's actually infuriating." Sloane smiled. "Good. I'd hate to be forgettable." That night, Lila came home with her. The door barely closed before Sloane had her pressed against it. Their mouths crashed together with the kind of urgency that came from weeks of holding back. Sloane's hands were in Lila's hair on her hips, her waist, her spine, pulling her closer, grounding herself in the feel of her. Lila responded with equal fire, her fingers slipping under Sloane's shirt, trailing along her stomach, nails lightly scraping. "Bedroom," Lila murmured against her lips. Now Sloane didn't argue. She led her there, stumbling over furniture. Laughter between kisses, need between breath. The moment Lila pushed her down on the bed, Sloane surrendered everything. Her control, her rhythm, her fear. She let Lila undress her slowly, reverently, like she was something worth worshipping. Not because of what she owned, but because of who she was beneath it all. And when Sloane pulled Lila onto the bed, when she kissed every inch of her like she'd memorized it in another lifetime, when she whispered her name over and over like a prayer, it wasn't about proving anything. It was about being seen, being chosen, being known. After they lay tangled in each other's arms, skin damp, limbs heavy, hearts thewing like matching drums, Sloane couldn't stop touching her. Gentle brushes of her fingers over Lila's arm, her shoulder, the line of her jaw. Lila's head rested on Sloane's chest, one leg draped over hers, and for a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, Lila broke the silence. "That was not casual." Sloane's voice was soft, raw. "It was everything but casual." Lila lifted her head. "I'm still scared." "So am I. But I don't want to run anymore." Sloane tucked a curl behind Lila's ear. "Then don't." "I'm not going anywhere." Lila kissed her again, slow and deep, and something shifted in the room. An unspoken understanding that whatever this was, it was real now. Messy, complicated, intense, but real. They fell asleep wrapped in each other. Riverton lights flickering through the window, casting soft gold across their skin. For the first time since their world had exploded, they weren't pretending. Not about names, not about fears, and definitely not about love. Sloane awoke first. The light filtering through the curtains was soft, gray early. Lila was still wrapped around her, one leg between hers, one arm sprawled over Sloane's stomach, face buried in the crook of her neck. She was warm and real and breathtakingly close. And for a moment, Sloane didn't move, couldn't because this, waking up to Lila, feeling her body breathe in sync with hers, felt like everything Sloane had never let herself want. She reached out slowly, brushing her fingers through Lila's curls, memorizing the way they curled around her knuckles. Lila stirred, her lips brushing Sloane's skin as she yawned into her shoulder. "Are you watching me sleep?" "That's creepy, Sloane." "No," Sloane murmured with a smile. "I'm appreciating the miracle of not waking up alone." Lila chuckled softly. "Well, the miracle's mutual." They lingered there a little longer, letting silence say what their bodies already knew. But eventually the morning's edges began to sharpen, phones buzzing, obligations nudging, the world insisting it still existed. Sloane kissed Lila's shoulder. "I have a board meeting in 2 hours. Yikes. I've got 3 back-to-back meetings and a grant application due. Can we cancel life?" "Tempting," Lila said, "but if we're building an empire of emotional stability and mutual adoration, we probably need income." Sloane groaned. "Fine, but I'm kidnapping you this weekend. Non-negotiable." "Do I get a ransom note?" "You'll get a silk robe and breakfast in bed. That's my ransom." Lila smirked. "I'm listening." That afternoon, Sloane walked into her office for the first time in weeks. The instant she entered the glass tower, it all hit at once, the pace, the power, the eyes on her, but something in her had shifted. She didn't feel untouchable anymore. She didn't want to. Her assistant, Nina, gave her a look. "You're glowing. Did you buy another company or get laid?" "Both," Sloane said dryly. Nina blinked. "Wait, you're serious?" Sloane let the question pass. "Any disasters?" "Nothing you can't charm your way out of." Still, tension tugged at the air. Sloane felt it the moment she stepped into the boardroom. The PR mess had passed, but some investors were rattled by the personal exposure. "We're not questioning your leadership, Sloane," one of them began. One of them said, "but perhaps you could be more selective with public relationships moving forward." Sloane's gaze sharpened. "Lila is not a scandal. And if this company ever asks me to apologize for loving someone genuine, you'll find my resignation letter on your desk before the coffee gets cold." Silence. Then slowly, another board member, a woman Sloane had once mentored, nodded. "Understood." And just like that, the meeting moved on. Sloane's hands trembled under the table. But she didn't let it show. For the first time in her career, she had stood up for her personal life without shame. And it felt right. That night, Lila came over again. She brought wine. Sloane cooked. It was laughably bad. Lila teased her mercilessly. But they ended up eating half-burnt pasta while sitting on the kitchen floor in their socks, giggling like teenagers. "You know you're ruining my standards for romance forever, right?" Lila said, nudging her. "All my future dates are going to feel like budget imitations of you." Sloane tilted her head. "Future dates, huh? I mean, hypothetical. You planning to leave me already?" Lila's face softened. "No, I'm not planning anything. Honestly, I'm just trying to be here. Present with you." Sloane leaned in, kissing her gently. "That's all I want." Later, after they moved to the couch, Sloane traced lazy circles on Lila's thigh. "Do you think this could work?" Lila looked up at her. "It is working. I mean long-term with the pressure, the attention, my life, your work, all of it." Lila didn't answer right away. "I think we'll have to keep choosing it over and over, even when it's hard." "I can do that. Can you let me in when it's messy? Can you stay when I'm scared?" They looked at each other. The answer was yes, even if they didn't say it. Lila reached for Sloane's hand and squeezed it. "You don't have to prove anything to me." Sloane blinked. "I always feel like I do." "Well, stop. You already have." That weekend, Sloane flew them to a quiet coastal town. Nothing flashy, no paparazzi, just an old cottage she secretly owned under a different name. They walked barefoot on the beach, shared secret jokes, watched movies under blankets, and kissed like they had nowhere else to be. On their last night there, Sloane couldn't sleep. She stood outside on the porch, watching the moonlight shimmer on the water. Lila came up behind her, slipping her arms around Sloane's waist. "Hey, you okay?" "Yeah. Just overwhelmed in a good way." "That's allowed. I used to think I had to earn everything. Fight for it. Own it. Win it." But this Sloane turned, resting her forehead against Lila's. You, Lila, smiled. You don't have to fight for me. You just have to let me stay. Sloane kissed her like a promise. Deep, slow, infinite. The ocean roared in the distance. And somewhere inside her, a wall crumbled for the last time. Because this love wasn't built on power or performance. It was built on truth. And for once in her life, Sloane Mercer finally felt free. They returned to Riverton on a Monday morning painted in gold. The sun rose behind them as the jet landed. Sloane's fingers still interlaced with Lila's, her heart beating steadier than it had in weeks. The air between them was quiet but full. Like the silence after a truth has been spoken. Like a room after a fire has been put out. They didn't need to say it. They were together now. And they both knew what that meant. It meant vulnerability. It meant presence. It meant choosing each other every damn day. Back in Riverton, the rhythm picked up again. Sloane went back to boardrooms and headlines, and Lila returned to her world of underfunded programs, overworked staff, and the relentless fight for dignity in a system that rarely offered it. But they made space, late-night dinners, sleepovers, lunches snuck between meetings, kisses exchanged in doorways, and more than anything, truth. Honest conversations. Even when they hurt, even when Sloane's instinct was to shut down, even when Lila's fear of being sidelined whispered that this couldn't last, they kept talking, kept reaching until one night something cracked. Sloane was late, not 10 minutes late, an hour late. Lila sat at the restaurant, her phone face up on the table, untouched glass of wine in front of her, heart thudding faster with every minute. She tried not to assume the worst. Tried not to let the old voice creep in. The one that said, of course she forgot. Of course she's too busy for you. Of course it wasn't real. But by the time Sloane finally arrived, flushed and breathless and visibly unraveling, Lila was already half out the door. Lila, wait, Sloane said, catching her by the arm. I'm sorry. The board meeting ran late and then there was a call about a breach in security and you didn't text. Lila snapped. Sloane blinked. I didn't think. That's the problem, Lila said. You didn't think about me. Not even a one-line text. I was under pressure. It wasn't personal. It feels personal when I'm sitting there alone while everyone in the restaurant starts recognizing me from your scandal and whispering about why I'm alone again. Sloane's stomach dropped. God, Lila, I'm so sorry. That wasn't what I know it wasn't. Lila cut in softer now. But if we're doing this, really doing this, you can't disappear into your world and forget I exist whenever it gets hard. Sloane stepped back, ashamed. I'm still learning. This isn't easy for me. I don't want easy, Lila said. I want real. I want the same version of you I had in that cottage barefoot. Honest present, not this curated version who belongs to the world first and me second. Sloane opened her mouth then closed it. Lila watched her. Can you give me that version of you, Sloane? Even when things go to hell. Sloane reached for her hand. I can try. I'll fail sometimes, but I won't stop trying. Lila hesitated, then squeezed her hand once. Okay, but I need to see it. The next day, Sloane canceled a press conference. Just canceled it. Told her team the company could survive one day without her smile and a blazer. She showed up at Lila's community center unannounced. Dressed down, hair tied back, no security, just Sloane. She spent the whole day helping with intake forms, delivering care packages, even folding chairs after a group therapy session. No cameras, no statements, just her. Lila saw it. All of it. And that night, she kissed Sloane on the steps of the center in full view of the volunteers and clients and Riverton. Not out of performance, out of certainty. But of course, peace never lasted long, especially not when you were dating a woman whose life was public property. The media had cooled until a new op-ed went viral, a hit piece, personal, cruel. An anonymous source claiming Sloane was using a noble woman for redemption points after the scandal. It dissected Lila's nonprofit work, implied she was naive, a social climber. The headline, Sleeping with Power, the charity girlfriend fairy tale. Lila found it first. She didn't tell Sloane. She didn't have to. Sloane's phone started lighting up with board alerts, media flags, text after text. And then one from Nina. She's not answering her phone. Go to her now. Sloane did. No driver. No car. She ran. Lila's apartment door was unlocked. She found her on the couch. Knees pulled to her chest. Face blank. Lila. Lila looked up. So I'm a charity case now. Guess the fairy tale got boring. That article is trash, Sloane said immediately, crossing the room. You know that. It doesn't matter what I know. Her voice cracked. It's what the world sees. Sloane kneeled in front of her. Let them look. Let them write. You're not theirs. You're mine. And I'm yours. They don't get to touch that. Lila shook her head, tears slipping silently. This is the part one was scared of. The part where I'm a name on your press sheet, a scandal in heels. Sloane grabbed her hands. Then let's fight back. Not with a press release. With truth. Come with me tomorrow to the gala. Walk in with me. Stand next to me. Let them see. Lila hesitated. You want to put me in the middle of it? You're already in the middle of my life. I'm not hiding you. Not anymore. Silence. Then Lila nodded. Fine, but I'm not wearing heels. Sloane smiled through a breathless, aching chest. Flats look better on you anyway. The gala was everything Lila had feared, and Sloane had prepared for sharp lights, sharper glances, a room filled with luxury and judgment, dressed in custom-tailored gowns and handcrafted smiles. It was held at a museum uptown, transformed into a cathedral of wealth for the evening. Champagne towers, crystal chandeliers, string quartets echoing off marble walls. Sloane had been to 1,000 events like it, but never like this. Never with Lila. She had never been more aware of a woman's presence beside her. And not because of how Lila looked, though she looked incredible, wearing a sleek black jumpsuit that hugged her curves and flats that made a silent statement louder than any diamond ever could. But because of what she meant. Sloane had never brought anyone to an event like this. Not as a partner, not as someone real, and certainly not as someone the world had already tried to tear apart. The moment they stepped out of the car, a wall of flashbulbs detonated. Sloane instantly reached for Lila's hand. You good? She murmured. Lila managed a tight smile. No, but let's do it anyway. Cameras cracked like gunfire. Voices barked, Sloane, over here. Lila, are you in love? Is this just PR cleanup? Sloane ignored them. She didn't flinch or slow. She moved straight ahead with Lila's hand locked in hers, chin lifted, gaze steady, and Lila, tense but unyielding, kept pace at her side. Inside, the air didn't soften. It sharpened. Eyes tracked them. Whispers followed like perfume. Lila went a little rigid, and Sloane leaned in. If one more woman looks at you like you don't belong, I'm buying this building just to kick her out. Please don't, Lila whispered. That's an extremely aggressive love language. I'm an aggressive woman. No kidding. They reached their table, around one dead center, impossible to overlook. Sloane's seat was beside the mayor. Lila's was next to a media executive Sloane had sued 3 years earlier, who sent a look sour enough to curdle champagne. Lovely of you to join us, Miss Mercer, she said. And this must be the famous charity girlfriend. How charming. Lila blinked but didn't shrink. Hi, I'm Lila. I work in housing equity, and I don't bite unless provoked. Sloane hid a grin. The evening rolled in waves, some warm, some counterfeit, some openly cruel. Sloane watched Lila navigate it all with quiet dignity and razor wit, and felt her chest swell with something dangerously close to awe. During the auction portion of the night, Sloane leaned over and whispered, Are you bored yet? I'm considering setting off the fire alarm just to escape. You know I'd fund an entire youth program in your name if you did. Lila smiled, then tilted her head. You do that anyway. Yes, but the alarm would be a lot sexier. Sloane didn't care about the auction or the speeches or the board members still unsure how to read her after the scandal. She only cared about one thing, her. Near the end of the night, Sloane slipped her hand onto Lila's thigh beneath the table. Just a touch, just presence. Lila looked at her and for a long moment, Sloane saw it. The fear still lingering, the hesitation, but also the trust and the spark. Come with me, Sloane whispered. Where, somewhere without cameras? Lila followed her through the hallway, down past staff-only doors into a quiet corner gallery. Empty, dark, quiet paintings watched them from the walls, pieces worth millions. But Sloane only had eyes for her. Lila turned toward her. We're going to get kicked out of a gala full of billionaires. So Lila murmured, kiss me before I lose my nerve. Sloane didn't wait. She pressed Lila against the wall, one hand cupping her jaw, the other at her waist. The kiss was urgent, breathless, not sweet, desperate, a reclaiming, a promise, a U to every headline that had tried to reduce Lila to a footnote. When they finally pulled back, Lila was panting. That was bold. You think I care what any of them say about you? Sloane said, they don't get to define you. You're the bravest person in this building and you're the one risking everything just to stand beside me. Sloane brushed a thumb along her cheek. It's not a risk. It's the most certain thing I've ever done. Even with the fallout, especially with the fallout. Lila stared at her for a long moment. Then, okay, I'm in and what? This is all of it. Sloane's smile was slow, wide, and devastating. Say it again. I'm in. She kissed her again, softer this time, but deeper. When they emerged from the hallway 20 minutes later, slightly flushed and barely composed. Sloane didn't care who noticed. She pulled Lila close as they stepped back into the ballroom and said, loud enough for anyone listening. You're coming home with me tonight. Lila arched a brow. Your place or mine? Sloane smirked. I want to ruin you in my own bed. Lila's eyes went dark with heat. Then what the hell are we still doing here? Sloane didn't sleep that night. Not because of the sex, though. Yes, it had been slow, intense, whispered, and left her breathless in ways no luxury ever had. Not because of the adrenaline of having Lila beside her, curled into her chest like she belonged there. No, Sloane didn't sleep because for the first time since they met, everything felt stable. And that terrified her more than any lie she'd ever told. Because Sloane Mercer didn't believe in stability. Not really. It was always conditional. Conditional on power, on control, on performance. And this thing with Lila wasn't built on any of those. It was built on truth, vulnerability, choice, which meant if she lost it, there would be nothing left to hide behind. She stared at the ceiling for hours, arm around Lila's waist, listening to her soft, steady breaths. And as the sun started to rise, a thought crept in that she couldn't shake. You don't deserve this. She tried to ignore it, tried to quiet the voice that always waited at the edges, but it grew louder. And by the time Lila stirred, Sloane had already pulled away. Morning. Lila murmured, still half asleep. Why do you look like you're about to break up with me or buy a small country? Sloane tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Neither. I just have a lot on my mind. You always do. Lila sat up, brushing hair from her face. What is it? Nothing urgent. Sloane stood, pulling on her shirt. Just the world knocking. You've been letting it knock without answering. Don't start opening doors now. Sloane paused at the window. It's not that easy. It could be. Lila's voice had a hint of something Sloane hadn't heard in a while. Fear. Sloane turned. I'm not pushing you away, but you're pulling yourself away. I can feel it. Sloane opened her mouth, closed it again. Lila stood now, too, arms crossed. Don't do this thing where you spiral quietly and shut me out like it's noble. If you're scared, tell me. If you're overwhelmed, say it. But don't shut down. I'm not shutting down, Sloane said, sharper than intended. Lila flinched. Sloane stepped forward immediately. I'm sorry. I'm trying not to mess this up. Then talk to me. Sloane hesitated, then quietly. What if I'm not built for this? Lila blinked. For what? For being known. For being loved without conditions. For letting someone see every crack and still stay. Lila's voice softened. You are built for this. You just never had the right person trying to see you before. Sloane looked away. You're better than me. That's not true. You fight for people. You save people. And her voice cracked. I manipulate. I perform. I hide. That's what I'm good at. That's what you used to be good at. Lila crossed the space between them. But now you're good at showing up, at trying, at choosing me, even when it's hard. Sloane's throat tightened. Lila's hand cooped her cheek. You don't have to be perfect to be loved, Sloane. You deserve someone less complicated. I deserve someone real, and you're the most real thing I've ever had. Sloane's chest trembled. I don't want to lose you. Then stop standing so far away when I'm right here. Sloane finally leaned in, resting her forehead against Lila's. Don't give up on me. Not unless you ask me to. Never. Lila kissed her slow and grounding, but under it, Sloane still felt the edges of fear pressing in. That night, when Lila left to visit her sister across town, Sloane sat alone in the penthouse and let the quiet wrap around her like a warning. She tried to focus, opened her laptop, checked on a proposal, but her phone buzzed, an unknown number. At first, she ignored it. Then, it buzzed again. This time, a message. You really think people are buying it? The poor girl and the billionaire. Cute, but not sustainable. Her blood ran cold. Another message. How much did you pay her to stay? And another. Does she know what your company really does in South America? Sloane stared at the screen. Then her phone rang. The number again. She didn't pick up, but the voicemail came through. When she listened to it, her stomach dropped. A voice digitally distorted but male saying things about Lila. Personal things, intimate things, things Sloane had never told anyone. She froze. Then dialed her head of security. I need you to trace a number and I need it now. Is this a threat? It's a warning. And someone just made Lila a target. The team mobilized instantly. The messages were traced to a burner. The number disappeared, but the damage was done. Sloane sat in her office, hands shaking, realizing something that terrified her more than anything else had. Lila was no longer just someone she loved. She was someone the world could hurt, and Sloane couldn't protect her. The next morning, Lila arrived with coffee, smiling. I survived family drama and brought caffeine as my victory prize. Sloane didn't smile back. We need to talk. Lila's face fell. What happened? Sloane showed her the texts. Played the voicemail. Lila went pale. Jesus. They're targeting you now. I can handle it. You shouldn't have to. Lila's voice was calm but firm. I'm not running, Sloane. Not from you. Not from this. I don't want you to get hurt. Then let me decide what I can take. Sloane stepped back. If something happened to you because of me. No. Lila's voice broke. Don't you dare push me away again. I'm not pushing you away. Then don't build the wall. Don't lock the door. Let me stay. Sloane's eyes filled. I don't know how. Lila cooped her face. Then I'll teach you day by day. But only if you stop trying to protect me by removing yourself from my life. Sloane finally broke. The tears came. Silent, messy, unguarded. And Lila pulled her in and held her until her body stopped shaking. You're not alone, Lila whispered. You've never been less alone. And this time, Sloane let herself believe it. They didn't leave the apartment for 3 days. Sloane led meetings, interviews, dinners. Lila skipped 2 shifts at the center. They shut the world out, not out of fear, but out of defiance, because something had shifted, not between them, but around them. The messages hadn't returned. Sloane's security team had swept the penthouse, traced all activity, tripled digital firewalls, but whoever had sent those threats was careful, experienced, intentional. They left no trace, no digital fingerprint, no name. Sloane didn't admit it out loud, but she'd seen this pattern before. Corporate sabotage, reputation warfare. She had enemies, plenty of them, and Lila. She was collateral in someone's power game. Sloane paced at night. She didn't sleep. She replayed the voicemail in her mind until it became a kind of sick rhythm. Does she know what your company really does in South America? The question that didn't come from nowhere because Sloane did know. There were contracts, investments, subdivisions she hadn't touched in years, buried under layers of delegation. But now she couldn't ignore them. And she couldn't risk Lila being dragged into something deeper, darker, more dangerous than either of them had prepared for. You're spiraling again, Lila said one evening, sitting on the edge of the piano bench, watching Sloane cross the living room for the 10th time. I'm not. Your face says you're about to fire half your board or start a private war. Both are tempting. Sloane. Sloane stopped. She turned. What if I told you there's something I haven't looked at? Something in the company? Something that could explain all of this? Lila straightened. What kind of something? Foreign investments, old projects, the kind of things I signed off on without reading because I trusted the wrong people. Lila stood and crossed to her. Then look at them now. Face them. If there's something toxic under your name, tear it out. What if it hurts us? What if it saves us? Sloane's jaw tightened. You believe I can fix it? I believe you have to. Sloane searched her face for fear. Found only determination. Lila didn't want to be protected. She wanted to fight with her together. Okay, Sloane said. Then we go to war. The next day, Sloane called a private meeting with her internal legal team, her ethics advisor, and her chief of global operations. No PR, no board, no spin, just truth. Pull every record from the South American division from the last 10 years, she ordered. I want full transparency. Names, partners, shell companies, logistics, everything. Sloan, that's massive. Why now? Her ethics officer asked. Sloan met his eyes coldly. Because someone just reminded me that silence makes me complicit. What they found made her sick. Unethical labor contracts. Third-party mining operations with environmental violations. A logistics firm linked to government bribes. Nothing directly under her name, but all under Mortke Sloan's empire. Her signature. How deep does it go? She asked, staring at the documents with shaking hands. Deep enough to destroy the brand if it gets out. Her legal lead said quietly. Sloan exhaled. Then we burn it down before they do. What? We go public. Sloan, we release the documents. We confess. We take the hit. We restructure from scratch. The shareholders will crucify you. Sloan looked away. Let them try. Lila wasn't surprised when Sloan told her. She was proud. You're doing the right thing. I might lose everything. Not everything. Sloan met her eyes. Lila held her hand. I'm still here. I don't deserve you. That's not your call to make. The day the expose went live, Mortke's stock dropped 32%. News outlets exploded. Headlines screamed. Shareholders raged. But something else happened, too. Whistleblower groups applauded the transparency. Activist networks called it historic. And Lila watched the whole thing unfold from the couch, Sloane's hand in hers, her thumb gently rubbing circles against her palm. You okay? She asked. No, Sloane admitted. But I'm free. The next few days were chaos. Sloane stood in front of cameras and owned every mistake. Not with rehearsed lines, with sincerity. She promised full investigations, reparations, immediate reforms, and then made one final move. She stepped down. Effective immediately, she announced at a press conference, I resign as CEO of Mortec. I will devote my energy and resources to repairing what was broken under my name. The room erupted. Sloane didn't flinch. That night, Riverton roared, but her apartment was still. Lila poured wine and raised her glass. To losing everything. To letting go of the wrong things so we can hold on to the right ones. To choosing love over legacy. To building something new. They clinked. Sloane looked at her, really looked. Would you ever want to build something with me? Lila paused. Like what? A foundation. A fund. Something that actually helps. Run by you, funded by me, but ours. Lila stared. You'd do that? I want your name on the door. Your heart in the mission. Your fire at its center. Lila's smile grew slow. Then yes. We build. Sloane exhaled, something deep inside finally unsealing. When Lila cupped her jaw and kissed her, soft, reverent, Sloane kissed back like the past had closed and the future had just opened its hands. 6 weeks. That's how long it took to turn rock bottom into bedrock for something new. 6 weeks since Sloane Mercer stood before the world and dismantled her own empire. 6 weeks since Lila took her hand and said, let's build. Now they stood together in the lobby of a renovated brick building in Northbridge, exposed beams overhead, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a bold new sign on the glass, the Haven Initiative, founded by Lila Bennett and Sloane Mercer. It didn't look like a monument to power. That was intentional. This wasn't a palace. It was a safe place, a resource hub, a sanctuary. And every inch of it screamed Lila's vision. And Sloane's unapologetic funding. I still don't believe this is real, Lila said softly, arms crossed as she turned in a slow circle. The desk is reclaimed wood. Sloane, I told you, no chrome, no ivory, no billionaire aesthetic, but the espresso machine is nicer than any apartment I've ever rented. Sloane grinned. Compromises had to be made. Lila stepped into her arms, her voice quieter now. We did this. You did this, Sloane whispered into her hair. I just gave it a roof. You gave it your name, your legacy. No, Sloane said, I gave it back to the people who deserved it. The press still followed them. They always would. But something had changed in the way the world looked at them. Lila wasn't just the girlfriend. She was a founder now, a face, a force. And Sloane had stopped trying to perform. She no longer needed rooms to respect her out of fear. Now she commanded presence with purpose. Their first public event was a panel on ethical rebuilding, corporate transparency, community reinvestment, deconstructing power. Sloane sat between Lila and a grassroots housing activist. She didn't speak the most, but when she did speak, it was with clarity, honesty, no polish, no mask. And when Lila leaned over after the event and said, "You were brilliant," Sloane didn't say, "Thank you," she said, "only because you stood beside me." At night, they cooked together badly. Sloane still burned toast. Lila was hopeless with timing, but they danced to music in the kitchen, bare feet on marble floors, wine in their hands, laughter spilling through the penthouse like a memory they'd finally earned. "This place feels different now," Lila said one night, curled against Sloane on the couch. "It used to intimidate me. And now it feels like home." Sloane kissed her temple. "Because you're here." "No," Lila whispered. "Because you are." Sloane exhaled. She didn't cry, but something inside her softened in a way it never had before. She kissed Lila like that truth lived between their lips, like she could taste the life they were building. But nothing was ever that clean. The person who sent the threatening text still hadn't been identified. The investigation had hit dead ends, and while security was tight, there was always that sliver of unease. One morning, Lila opened a letter. No return address, just a single line handwritten in red ink. "You really think people forget?" She didn't tell Sloane immediately. She meant to, but Sloane had just come home from another donor pitch meeting, cheeks flushed with excitement, smiling like she used to only smile behind boardroom doors. "It's working," Sloane had said, dropping her bag on the floor. "They're finally seeing what we're trying to do." Lila had forced a smile. "That's amazing." But that night, after Sloane fell asleep, Lila sat on the edge of the bed reading that sentence over and over. The next day, Sloane found the letter in the trash. Lila hadn't even hidden it well. Her hands shook as she pulled it out, unfolded it, read it twice, then stormed into the kitchen. "When were you going to tell me?" Lila froze mid-step. "Sloane, don't lie. I wasn't trying to keep it from you. I just didn't want to ruin the moment." "You were happy." Sloane's voice was low and sharp. "You're getting threats again, and I'm walking around smiling like an idiot." "You deserve to smile." Lila snapped. "You've sacrificed more than anyone even knows. That doesn't mean I get to ignore what's happening to you." Lila stepped forward. "I'm not fragile. I've dealt with worse. I just didn't want this place, this life we're building, to become about fear again." Sloane exhaled, her jaw clenched. "We don't get to choose when we're safe, Lila. But we do get to face it together. No more secrets. Not from you. Not from me." "Okay," Lila said softly. "No more secrets." The next week, the investigation finally paid off. Nina called Sloane while she and Lila were mid-lunch. "We have a name," Nina said. "One of the anonymous board members from your pre-resignation circle used a proxy server untraceable email. He was betting against Mortka's recovery and targeting Lila to keep you distracted and unstable." Sloane felt her stomach twist. "What happens now?" "You already stepped down. You're untouchable. But him? We've got enough to take him down hard. Want to bury him?" Sloane looked at Lila across the table. Then at the life they were building, the coffee cups, the grant documents, the real raw future in front of them. "No," Sloane said. "Just make sure he never comes near her again." Lila raised an eyebrow as Sloane hung up. "You didn't go full Game of Thrones on him." "I wanted to." "Why didn't you?" Sloane smiled. "Because I've already won." Lila blinked. "You think this is a win?" Sloane leaned across the table. "You hear? Us? That's the only thing I ever wanted." Lila reached for her hand. "Then let's stop surviving. Let's start living." Sloane nodded together. "Always." The ceremony wasn't extravagant. There were no reporters, no designer gowns, no billion-dollar venue dripping in chandeliers and champagne fountains. It took place in the back garden of the Haven Initiative beneath a canopy of twinkle lights with mismatched chairs, tables covered in sunflowers, and a guest list made up of exactly 32 people. Family, friends, clients from the center, a few former board allies, and one old woman who used to run the bakery where Lila worked in college. Sloane stood at the edge of the garden in a simple white linen suit. No jewelry, no makeup, just herself and a look in her eyes like she was ready to give away everything she'd ever been in exchange for the woman walking toward her. Lila wore pale gold, no veil, her hair pinned up loosely, curls soft against her shoulders, smile trembling like she couldn't quite believe this was real. But it was. Everything about this was real. There had been no grand proposal, no viral moment, just a night on the rooftop 3 months after the threat stopped. The world had quieted and Sloane had finally exhaled long enough to feel peace in her chest. They'd been sharing a bottle of wine. Lila had been sitting between Sloane's legs, her head tilted back on Sloane's shoulder, looking at the stars. "You know I want forever with you, right?" Lila had said so casual it took Sloane a second to understand. "I'm not asking. Not yet. I just want you to know." Sloane had kissed her cheek. "I already knew." But a week later, Sloane had taken Lila back to that first park. The one with the fountain, the one where they almost kissed before everything unraveled. She didn't get on one knee. She didn't make a speech. She just looked Lila in the eye and said, "Let's stop almost." Lila had said yes before she even realized she was crying. Now they stood facing each other in front of people who loved them. A soft breeze stirred the lights overhead. Lila reached for Sloane's hands and squeezed them once. "I was so scared the first time I saw you," she said. "Not because you were mysterious or beautiful or clearly smarter than me, though all of that was true, but because something about you made me feel like I could be seen, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that. I'm still scared sometimes. But every time I look at you, I remember what it feels like to be brave." Sloane's fingers tightened around hers. "I didn't believe in love when I met you," she said. "I believed in survival, in strategy, in keeping my heart out of reach. But you didn't just reach it. You walked straight into it like it belonged to you. And now I can't imagine breathing in a world where you're not mine." They exchanged rings. No elaborate vows. Just a quiet promise pressed into skin. "I choose you. Over and over as long as we both wake up breathing." The kiss was soft, almost shy, but everyone stood and clapped anyway. The kind of clapping that was louder than the moment required because everyone knew what this had cost. Everyone knew what they'd survived and what they'd finally earned. Later, while guests were dancing and champagne flutes clinked in every direction, Lila dragged Sloane to a corner near the garden gate and whispered, "You didn't cry." "I almost cried, but you didn't." "I'm crying on the inside." Sloane teased. "It's very efficient." "Liar." Sloane smiled, then cooped Lila's face with both hands. "Do you want to disappear with me for a week?" "Depends. Are we talking private island or hiking boots?" "Neither. Just you and me. Somewhere with a bed, good coffee, and absolutely no cameras. And no boardrooms, no suits, no phones, just soft sheets and quiet mornings." Lila leaned in. "You drive a hard bargain, Sloane." Sloane kissed her like they had nowhere to be for the rest of their lives. They did disappear. For 12 days they lived in a small coastal town with no reception where they slept in until noon. Read books under the covers, cooked together. Fought over who made the better tea, and had long, slow sex with the windows open to the sound of the waves. Sloane laughed more in those 12 days than she had in years. Lila wrote again just for herself. One night, Sloane woke to find her sitting at the table by the window, scribbling something with her glasses on and hair falling around her face. "What are you writing?" Sloane murmured. "Sleep heavy. Something I want to show the kids when we open the second haven next year." Sloane blinked. "Second. We're expanding." Lila said simply, like it was obvious. "The grant came through and I think it's time." Sloane sat up watching her. "You're going to change the world." "No," Lila said, standing and climbing back into bed. "We are." Sloane wrapped her arms around her and whispered. "As long as you're next to me, always." A year later, the second haven opened. Lila gave a speech. Sloane stood in the back unnoticed, watching, proud, in love. 2 years later, Sloane quietly returned to business, but not as CEO. She became an advisor, a mentor, someone who taught young women how to lead without losing their soul. She never gave interviews about Lila. She didn't have to. Their story was already written in every building they funded together. Every home they helped secure. With every life they changed, Sloane stopped hiding, not behind designer clothes, not behind strategy, not behind silence. Because each night she went home to Lila. And Lila never stopped seeing her as enough. On bad days, especially on bad days, they argued, stumbled, and kept growing. But through all of it, they stayed. In every morning breath, every shared laugh, every stolen kiss over coffee, one simple truth finally rooted in Sloane Mercer: she was loved. Not for her power, not for her name, but for who she was when she let someone all the way in. And Lila never once stopped choosing her. If you enjoyed this content and want to support the channel in a special way, try clicking the thanks button below. It's the one with the heart and $sign icon. With super thanks, you can make a direct contribution to the channel, which helps me keep creating awesome videos for you.